welcome back, guys, to Kieran's Corner. Once again, a very special episode of Your Team, Your Say. And I have Tom from @British Bird Gang here to talk about his Arizona Cardinals. How you doing, Tom?
Yeah, not too bad. Happy with the draft, Now just got to wait for the season to begin.
I mean, makes one of us if we're both happy with our team's draft. But without further ado, guys, welcome to Kieran's Corner.
Kick it and go. Kick it and go. Slip on, spin move, in zone, go. From sideline to touchdown, I put on a show. Kick it and go. I had to kick off and go. Kick it and go. I had to kick off and go. Slip on, spin move, in zone, go. From sideline to touchdown, I put on a show. Kick it and go. I had to kick off and go.
So, guys, welcome to Kieran's Corner. I'm actually really excited about this. A lot of regular listeners of the podcast will know that I'm a little bit critical of Cliff Kingsbury. So I think that's where we should take the logical start point of this. And when he was hired back in 2019, obviously the season before you drafted Josh Rosen, he was unceremoniously shot out of a cannon to the Miami Dolphins. How did you feel when Cliff Kingsbury was first announced as head coach?
I mean, to be honest, his college record may be a bit wary, but the fact that we were trying to go outside the box as opposed to going with an old retread, I was happy we were trying something like that. And so far, so good, I think.
I mean, that's the thing we're going to debate. We'll start off, obviously, not the worst record in the world, 5-10-1, as it was his first NFL head coaching gig, and then obviously made a little bit of a leap in 2020. But from my perspective, do you think the NFL at this point, and we'll get onto the intricacies of Cliff's game in a moment, but do you kind of feel like people are looking at these college systems, like the air raid systems, and thinking they're going to work better in the league than they possibly are? Obviously, Kyler came from that sort of system, but do you think there was a bit too much hype behind him? Maybe expectations should have been tempered slightly.
I do think, sometimes he did go a bit overboard with him. Obviously he struggled in college. I think he finished with a losing record with Texas Tech, albeit they weren't the biggest program in the country either.
It was 5-9, I think, was his final year.
Yeah, but Andy's obviously worked with some of the best quarterbacks who are in the league at the moment. So, you can see why they took a shot with him. And obviously it didn't start too well with winning only 5 games in his first year, 8 in his second. Some of them could have actually been won had he made better decisions. So I think that's where he really needs to improve going into 2021.
Did you think it's down to coordinators as well, especially because we've seen... I mean, the Bills game is a game that you guys, in my opinion, you stayed in the game a lot, but I feel like you got really lucky with that Hail Murray at the end there. And, it was a great play from Kyler, a great play from DeAndre Hopkins, a guy who I think is the best receiver in the National Football League. But do you feel like a lot of these games you shouldn't have been down when you were down in the fourth quarter?
I think, obviously we've been trying to keep the games close, in which we were able to do for pretty much all the season. It's there was only one game that we lost, which was by more than 10 points. So, a couple of things go our way. Could have been a completely different story.
Yeah. Were you happy with, getting rid of Rosen after his first year and then going for Kyler? I know I would prefer Kyler Murray as a quarterback, but how did you feel that they just got rid of him so quickly? Or were you all on board for Kyler Murray to be your guy?
Well, I mean, personally, I did buy a Josh Rosen jersey in his rookie season, so I was kind of disappointed that they got rid of him after 1 year. But that's a completely selfish point of view. But, from a team perspective, you can see why they did it, because obviously Kyler fits Cliff's system a lot better than what Josh Rosen has done, or he would have done. So, you can see why they did it, even though it did mean basically we tossed away a first-round pick after 1 year. But, we did that with Steve Wilkes, didn't we? So it's not like we're opposed to these, quick, whatever the word is, Like just taking
quick turnarounds.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, I was kind of interested when the Josh Rosen pick was made because I was very, very high on him, and I thought, damn, you put this guy in maybe a decent spread offense, he's going to do well, and then you come in with Cliff Kingsbury only a year later who gets rid of him and has that air raid style offense. And I will talk about the 2019 offseason. You guys made a ton of moves going into the 2020 season. I think personally, especially after the draft, you guys probably have one of the best rosters on paper. And Kyler's very clearly a very good quarterback. Obviously, he has turnover problems, but that can be a fault of the air raid system. How did you feel going into the offseason when the first move you made was picking up DeAndre Hopkins, who is, in my opinion, probably a lot of people's opinion, the best wide receiver in the NFL?
I mean, I wouldn't disagree with you there. I am also of the same opinion. He's the best in the game, and I'm glad he's actually a Cardinal. I mean, I still actually can't believe that we actually pulled off that move, giving away a broken down David Johnson in a second round draft pick. Bargain of the century, probably.
I was about to say, I don't know what Cliff or your GM did to wangle that deal, but that was absolutely phenomenal that you managed to trade a washed up running back and a second round pick for probably the best pair of hands in the entire league. And you add that to a guy like Larry Fitzgerald, who is an all time great. And you already had a ton of talent at the team. I know he's left now, but being an LSU guy, I'm obviously a massive, massive fan of Patrick Peterson. And some of the weapons you guys added, even on defense, with guys like Isaiah Simmons, who I think will probably have a breakout year this year. You have this incredibly strong roster. Did you almost feel a little bit like probably how the Cleveland Browns felt year before last in the 2020 season, where given the strength of your roster, you kind of underachieved a little bit?
I think, the fact that we missed the playoffs is a disappointment in itself because, as you say, the roster was pretty good, but the results just weren't there throughout the season. Like, we lost games that we should have won, especially like the last two when we played backup quarterbacks. Losing them's just unforgivable, really, given what we needed them to do. Because had we won one of them, I think we'd have made the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think you would have fared well against a couple of the playoff teams. I think with the guys you've got, guys like Kyler, who, yeah, he does turn the ball over a lot, but he does tend to shine in big moments. We saw that in his college career, and he hasn't quite had the opportunity to do that in the NFL. But before we talk about how this roster is building and how this roster is evolving, what would you have changed last season as a fan to sort of make not even the fan base feel better, but just you better personally?
I think, what do you mean, like as a result sort of thing?
Yeah. Are there any things you would have changed that you think Cliff should have played more aggressive in certain games or more conservative in other games? Are there any games where there were big mistakes made that really shouldn't have happened?
There were a few where we should have maybe taken a field goal instead of pushing on trying to get a fourth down conversion, which we never managed to do. Had we taken the 3 points, could have been a completely different ball game. So yeah, I think just taking the points when they're there, maybe sometimes is actually better than trying to force the thing. Yeah,
I felt that Cliff, it kind of feels like he still thinks he's at college with some of the attempts and stuff he makes. Just, I'm not going to say questionable because points on the board is always good and aggressive coaches normally get results. But there were some fourth down calls you guys made where not necessarily that it was a bad call to go for fourth down, but just the play call. I'm still confused that Andy Reid calling a passing play on 4th and inches, but it worked for the Chiefs. So, Cliff's an NFL coach. I can't question him too much, but you guys made some incredible off-season moves after what is very, very much a disappointing season, I would say. But let's start with the big free agency signing. JJ Watt, how did you feel landing a future Hall of Famer like that? Well, I know you've got some Hall of Famers on your team already, but how did you feel landing a Hall of Famer like JJ Watt?
Yeah, to be honest, I couldn't believe that when I first saw it pop up on Twitter. Like, I think it was Adam Schefter or someone retweeted it. And I was like, I'm sure this is a Photoshop, but then I saw who it was from. And it was like, oh, okay, he signed for Arizona, I see. And it comes out, we've got him. And, couldn't be happier, really, even though some people might think he's washed up. He's still one of the best defensive ends, probably in NFL history.
Yeah, I saw washed thrown around a lot. And I did think you paid him quite highly, but JJ's not going to be a guy who's giving you 60 snaps a game. He's going to give you 30, but he's going to have production on every single one of those 30 snaps. If we talk hard working, he might be the hardest working player in the league. And I think if Arizona still, I know you have a lot of veteran players, but you're still kind of the culture you're building. It's still very young. Cliff's only been there a couple of years. He's still got to cultivate something. Do you think the JJ Watt move was also there to sort of like cultivate a culture in the locker room to try and help bond everyone?
I'd like to think so, yeah, because one of the criticisms of the Cardinals last year seemed to be like there was a lack of leadership from the players. So obviously bringing in a guy like JJ Watt, he's been around the league like 10 years now. He's won everything except like obviously Super Bowl, that sort of thing. But he's just one of those guys who's going to be a vocal leader in the locker room, one for the younger guys to look up to, aspire to be like him,
Yeah, I kind of feel like that actually resonates through the entirety of your free agency. You went and got AJ Green, a great veteran, kind of lost a step last year, but he can very easily have a bounce back year. And with a dynamic quarterback like Kyler, that'd be very easy to happen. We've got Malcolm Butler, who possesses one of the most famous Super Bowl highlights of all time, who's also a veteran, been in the game a ton of time. Matt Prater as well, great kicker, veteran kicker, held the longest field goal in the league at one point. And then another veteran in Brian Winters. Does looking at this free agency really make you feel that my assessment of the JJ Watt pick was right, that you're really trying to get some veterans in the building and make sure that rubs off on the younger guys you've brought in?
Yeah, I can see that being the case because obviously wide receiver, with Larry Fitzgerald maybe not returning this year, we'd be left with DeAndre Hopkins and a bunch of young guys who are pretty much unproven, or they haven't done it consistently, like Christian Kirk. So obviously AJ Green's got to come in, hopefully be a good second pair of hands for Kyler to throw at. And like you said, he had a down year last year.
That's recovering from an injury, though. You know what I mean? I feel like it's rare a player comes back from an injury and has a career year. That's rare.
I mean, he was having Brandon Allen and Ryan Finley throwing to him as well, so that can also go into the equation.
That's a very good point. And it was very clear early on, as good as Joe Burrow is, the chemistry wasn't quite there. So that obviously affected a guy as well. Matt Prater and Brian Winters, great pickups. But let's talk about the draft, because you guys went hard in this draft. And your first pick, Zaven Collins, I praised as a great pick. I think potentially there was still a couple of linebackers on the board at the time, but between JOK and Zaven Collins, there's obviously the concerns about JOK's injury. So how did you feel when Zaven Collins' name was read out by the commissioner?
I was honestly surprised, to be honest, because I didn't see linebacker as a massive need for us going into the draft. So he's not even a guy I really considered, as outside of a couple of mock drafts where all the cornerbacks and wide receivers had already gone. So I had to pick someone at 16. So I think that's obviously the Cardinals had him highly rated on their board. He was one of their top 5 alpha players, apparently, according to Steve Keim. So
he sort of is the opposite of Isaiah Simmons in that respect, where Isaiah Simmons is more built like a safety, very fast, very athletic. Zaven Collins is a very, very traditional big boy linebacker who's going to plug gaps and lay a hit on people. Do you think that kind of what the thinking is? They need somebody to pair with Isaiah Simmons to sort of complement his play style so they can get the most out of both?
Yeah, I can see that being the case because after the draft pick was made, Steve Keim came out and said, having him, having Collins and Simmons would be like having a pair of trees in the heart of the defense. So, like, obviously, two
That's
massive
a great
guys.
analogy.
Yeah, like, obviously, Zayvon Collins isn't exactly a slouch. He's got quite a good bit of athleticism to his own game. So, I think he'll be used in a multitude of ways. Like, we'll probably be using Simmons as well.
Yeah, I feel like Isaiah Simmons has incredible football IQ. And even though last year probably wasn't the year a lot of people expected for him, I know, at least myself, I was very, very high on him going into the draft. But I feel like Zayvon Collins is the perfect complement to that. And that moves us on to your second selection, a guy who he might be the only guy on the team shorter than Kyler, but he's got a ton of speed, fairly good hands, although I feel like my colleague Lim was totally correct in saying that he would work better as a running back. How did you feel about the Rondale Moore pick?
I mean, he's another one who, like, obviously we needed wide receiver options or, like, offensive options for Kyler to use. And, like, there's a couple of tight ends on the board at the same time, which I thought maybe we'd go for, like, the Penn State guy, Pat Freiermuth, isn't it?
Pat Freiermuth, yeah, he's good.
I thought he could have been like the option at 49, but no, Rondale Moore was it. And, obviously I'd seen a few of his highlights before the draft, and I've been watching him ever since because, he's just so fun to watch when he's got the ball in his hands. So I'm looking forward to see if he can do that in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, besides Rondale Moore, your entire draft was like defensive besides Michael Manet. But you got a couple guys here like Marco Wilson. Do you think they're going to kind of have him as like a slot corner, see if he can replace what you're missing from Patrick Peterson, or do you think you're just going to sort of have him sit around Malcolm Butler and sort of learn from a veteran, learn the intricacies of playing corner? Because Marco is great physically, but I feel like his decision making isn't there. We saw he threw away the Gators game against LSU with the shoe throw. I don't know if you're aware of that. That was one of the things I wanted to put in the draft guide while scouting him, was that he has an incredible arm. But do you think that he's going to get in right away, or do you think they're just going to let him sit and develop?
I think obviously he'll need to develop his ball skills, as you said, because he's got all the athletic skill in the world. Like, he completely blew up at the pro day, posted like a 99 athletic score, which is like the maximum. So like, he's got enough athleticism. He just needs like the ball skills, needs to learn how to probably tackle a bit better, know how to locate the ball, stuff that he'll probably learn from guys like Malcolm Butler and also the coaches. But I think in the meantime, he'll do a decent job on special teams. So he'll get used. He is a
good special teams player. I will say that. Like, in terms of the utility he's got on special teams, I think he can take your special teams to another level. I think that's something people forget. But look at did you see the Chargers versus New England game last season?
I don't particularly watch when it's not the Cardinals.
Okay,
it's interesting, to be honest.
It is an example of why you pay attention to special teams. Chargers, very bad special teams unit last year. Patriots, one of the best. It was 45-0. And it was 90% of that game was special teams plays. The New England offense was not playing very well. And I think adding a guy like Marco Wilson, or actually said this on a podcast before, even a Tay Gowan, who isn't the most athletic player, but is fast, and you can potentially use him as like a gunner or something. Yeah, it takes your special teams to the next level. And I didn't watch a great deal of Arizona last year, but how did you think your special teams performed when they were on the field?
I think we were actually one of the best, special teams units. Obviously, we didn't have the big return numbers or anything like that, but coverage unit, I think we ranked top 10 or something like that. We got one of the best special teams coaches in the league, you seem to say. So, who am I to judge that?
Yeah, no. Stats wise, yeah, you guys are incredible on special teams, and special teams are a hard one because a lot of people do tend to forget it. But going over those notable draft names there and the free agency games, I don't want to say expectations because it's hard to place expectations on a team with so many new members. But what are your hopes for next season? Whether it be making the playoffs or winning the Super Bowl or anything in between, what are you really hoping to see out of this team next season? And any players you'd like to see potentially step up?
I think obviously everyone wants to win a Super Bowl, don't they? So let's go with that for my aim. But I think really making the playoffs would be a good start because, I mean, we got an extra game to play, but we were so close to making it last year. And hopefully we can erase some of those mistakes and take that final step, make it into the playoffs. And then who knows who's going to win in the playoffs?
I mean, do you think another... Well, we can't have 8-8 this year, can we? So let's say like a 9-8 year or whatever. Do you think do you think Cliff's job isn't safe this year? Do you think he's on the hot seat at this point?
I don't particularly think so. I know like some of the fan base do seem to think him and Steve Keim are like always on the hot seat, but I don't think that's the case. You know, I think they've definitely got this year to prove what they can do. And I think they probably got next year as well before they think about making any more rash decisions like they did with getting rid of Wilkes after 1 year, albeit that was a warranted decision. I just think like the progress they've made under Cliff, you know, it's worth seeing where it goes because what have they got to lose?
Yeah, no, you make a good point as well. And I do keep talking about this roster though. Are there any players that you expect to break out this year or hope make a step up from their performances last year? I know I mentioned Isaiah Simmons. He's a guy who I think is going to have a breakout year. Are there any guys in that vein you think are going to have a breakout year or you hope have a breakout year?
I mean, I'd love for Isaiah Simmons to actually stay on the field for pretty much all the season because last year he was barely used as a rookie. And like when he was used, he made some big plays and like he had some big performances, but it was like they just didn't seem to trust him. Or it was the fact that we had Devondre Campbell playing his position and it was like he wasn't playing that badly, so maybe they just thought we could get by, let Simmons like sit out the year basically and use him when needed. But yeah, I think he'll definitely make a step up this year on the defensive side. On offense, I would obviously like to see Andy Isabella make something of it because, you know, we got him from the pick that came from the Josh Rosen trade. And everyone's just like, thinks, you know, every time Andy Isabella makes a mistake, everyone's like, yeah, well, DK Metcalf wouldn't have made that mistake. But the thing is, was DK Metcalf on our board? We don't know. So yeah,
I think it's weird to compare two players as well that are so different.
Yeah, but it seems to be like the thing everyone seems to go to every week. Like Andy Isabella's not playing, well, DK Metcalf is. So it's like, yeah, I'd just like to see Andy Isabella silence the doubters and actually play a bit.
But that's, you know, as a Patriots fan, I hear that every time N'Keal Harry is brought up. So is DK Metcalf and AJ Brown and basically any receiver who went after him who outperformed him. I'm used to hearing that. But I like Andy Isabella, and I mean, looking at it, you guys might have the strongest receiving core in the league right now. You've got AJ Green, DeAndre Hopkins, Andy Isabella, Christian Kirk. You guys are kind of building like one of the best. I know people talk about the Cowboys a lot, but how do you feel about having a receiver core that good with a quarterback who also is that good?
Yeah, I mean, it is exciting to think what they could be, but obviously games of football sadly aren't played in my mind because, you know, we'd be winning the Super Bowl all the time if that was the case. But like, yeah, you know, we use 4 wide receiver sets a lot. So obviously we're going to be using more wide receivers. So the more legitimate options we have at the position, the better, I think.
And before we sort of get into how you become an Arizona Cardinals fan, would you like to throw out a record prediction for the Cardinals next season? How do you think they'll finish?
Well, I'd like to say 10-7 at least. So yeah, a couple games better than last year.
Get a winning record under your belt and finally have Cliff, get over that hump. I mean, it's his third year. I feel like he's probably going to make a leap. But with that being said, you told me you're a Cliff Kingsbury truther, a guy who I struggle to believe in, but I want to hear why you like him and why you think he's the right man for the Cardinals job, despite everything that is said about him.
I mean, to be honest, he's the coach, and really, if I complain as much as I want, that's not really going to make a difference, is it? So I just see it as like supporting the people who are in charge to make the correct decisions. And obviously, if he doesn't pan out, they'll just find someone else, and hopefully he is the guy.
Do you think his experience as a quarterback, like for the Patriots and stuff, sort of lends itself to his coaching, and maybe he's better suited at the NFL level than he was at the college level?
I think it's hard to say because obviously college is completely different to the NFL. Like, obviously with like all the recruiting and all that, he doesn't have to do that sort of thing anymore, does he? But like, obviously when he's at Texas Tech, he'd be there phoning up high school kids all the time and like trying to get them to come to Texas Tech as opposed to like Oklahoma, Texas, or like the biggest schools,
I will say I like what he did for Dakota Allen, a linebacker who's currently with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had, theft of guns while at Texas Tech. Obviously left, became a star on Last Chance U, but Cliff was very big on the fact that he had changed and shown growth and improvement. Do you think that's important to have with a lot of the younger guys he's bringing in? He's obviously brought in the veteran presence, but do you think that's helpful that he's willing to give young guys second chances and say that, hey, first impressions aren't the only impressions you make on me as a coach?
Yeah, I think so. That's obviously a good skill to have as a coach because obviously in the NFL, you're going to be working with guys who've been in the league for like 10 years. Guys who've been in the league 2 years, guys who've not even been in the league at all. It's all a mixed bag. You need to like find out what works for each player sort of thing. So it's not really like a one thing fits all sort of coaching. Got to sort of like adapt to each person, I suppose.
Yeah, I just feel like, obviously following coaches like Belichick and stuff, he's not huge on second chances. He's very do your job, prove yourself sort of guy. But I kind of like that. That's one thing I do like about Cliff, that he's very willing to give guys second chances, and he's very willing to let guys make mistakes as long as they're going to learn from them. I think that speaks well for you guys as a team, because you could potentially, especially when you bring in guys who maybe have underperformed at other teams and then you bring them in to your organization, then they can potentially do better. I think that's a great thing for Cliff to have. But before we move on to sort of like the last sort of segment, how do you feel about Kyler? Because he is immensely talented. His ceiling is ridiculous. He's crazy athletic. He's I think the first player in history to go first overall pick in the NFL and then top 5 pick in the Major League Baseball draft. How do you feel as him as a quarterback? And do you feel like he showed a lot of progression over his first 2 years?
Yeah, I think so, because obviously his first year he came in the league, won Offensive Rookie of the Year. But I think it was in a landslide sort of thing. There wasn't really much competition to him. So and then he started off last season like house on fire. Like he was in MVP consideration like first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. But then he decided maybe I can truck this Miami defender. And then after that, his performance just wasn't up to that sort of standard. So hopefully in his third year, he learns not to do that anymore. Just takes what he can get, throws the ball to whichever receivers are open. Make better decisions.
Does he sort of remind you of Russell Wilson a little bit? And I'm not a person who makes player comparisons much, and you haven't got the worst offensive line in the league, but did you sort of get like sort of shades of Russell Wilson when you see him back there scrambling around in the pocket and extending the plays and then just, airing it out and always seeming to find someone. Does it sort of remind you of Russell Wilson watching that go down?
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to actually have the boot on the other foot in that instance, because so many times over the years we've seen us, like our defense, falling over themselves trying to get to Russell Wilson. But then he's there just walking out, making ridiculous throws down the field, and then nothing really can do about that. Just have to applaud it. So obviously it's nice that we've actually got our own player who's capable of doing that.
I was going to say, it's frustrating to watch anytime the Patriots play the Seahawks and, you absolutely obliterate their offensive line. And then Russell Wilson does some mad dashing, crosses the field 2-3 times, and then gets a ball out into the end zone, which is what was so impressive about the Hail Murray to DeAndre Hopkins. How did you feel in that moment? Because that must have been a heart stopper as he was getting mobbed by pass rushers and he managed to escape. Can you sort of talk me through your feelings from the time the ball snapped until you realized Hopkins was come down with the football?
The annoying thing about that play was the fact I ended up watching it on a delay, because obviously I follow the game on Twitter and like everyone's going crazy, like something mad has happened, and I'm like wondering what's gone on. And then like obviously my feed and eventually catches up and I see the play in its entirety. And it's like Khaled just rolls out, manages to get past the one defender who has like a free shot at him. And then he just hurls the ball downfield as he's falling out of bounds. And then obviously in the end zone, there's like 3 Buffalo Bills. And then you just see a pair of black gloves above everyone else. And it's DeAndre Hopkins catching the game-winning touchdown. Just mental.
I mean, Kyler said it best. He said, fuck it. Hopkins has got to be there somewhere. And like I said, probably the best receiver in the NFL. Even if not in terms of just his hands might be the safest pair of hands in the entire game. So if you put it up there, D-Hop's probably going to come down with it. I'm going to be honest with you. But this is a question I've got to ask. This is sort of the last section of the show. I always talk to people about how they became a fan of their team. But how and why the Arizona Cardinals? How did that sort of come about?
Well, I first started watching the NFL back in 2008, and I picked up the latest copy of Madden, which was Madden 09 at the time. So, like, I created myself as a game, thinking, this is the closest I'll get to being in the NFL. So, like, I created myself, and then you do the draft thing, and then the Arizona Cardinals selected my player. So it was like, that just seemed like a good reason enough to follow them as my team. In 2008 happened to be the Super Bowl year. And I was thinking maybe that's like going to be the thing every year. We're going to be making the Super Bowl, maybe actually winning it the next year. But like, we've obviously not been back since then, sadly.
Well, I was going to say, this seems to be like a common theme with British fans, especially. So I live out in Cincinnati right now, and a lot of people here support Cincinnati, obviously, is where they're from. And a lot of people over the state of Ohio, it's a split. And it's sort of the same in every state that you get the split. So you have your Cleveland, your Bengals, and then the Steelers because they're kind of close, and then the Cowboys because they're just the most
team, aren't they?
Yeah, they're just the most famous team. So you sort of see that a lot. But it's very interesting. Every time I speak to British fans, it's never that's who my parents supported or that's the area I'm from. It's always, that's the first team I played as in Madden, or when I spoke to Kieran, a Green Bay Packers fan, his was, they were wearing green when I saw him on TV, and I'm Irish, so he likes them. And it's always some super interesting reasons. I think a little bit more interesting than how most American fans is. I was just born here.
It's one of those things, though, isn't it? Like, if you've not really got like a link to this state, you need to find some way of getting your team. Like, obviously, you could watch the Super Bowl and follow the winner or follow the loser. You could like find one of those random generator things like NFL UK put out every now and then. Use them to select your team.
Well, I literally spoke about this in the first episode of Your Team, Your Say. How I became a Patriots fan was I bought Madden. It was kind of fun, so I was messing around with it, and then I saw my friend Ken at the pub, he was like, "Oh, American football's great" or whatever. He was switching teams. He was sick of the Patriots for some unbeknown reason, and wanted. He was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna roll with the Texans. They're a cool team. Do you want my old New England stuff?" And that's literally how I became a New England fan. And I put it in my head together. I'm from England, New England, kind of makes sense. And that's what I love about the UK fans, especially, is they have way better reasons and stories for supporting teams. And then the one thing that Americans will never understand. Have you ever been to one of the NFL UK games?
I have, yeah.
How
I've been
great
to
is
several
it?
of them.
How great is it when you go in there, though, and see all 32 teams represented, and sometimes even some of the old NFL EU teams?
Yeah, it's crazy. You can see, like, obviously people do, like, the game, don't they, where, like, they try and get a photo with, like, a person wearing the jersey of, like, every other team. So it's, like, just crazy, the sort of jerseys you see. And obviously you see, like, university football teams, sometimes they're wearing them. And then, like, really obscure teams, sometimes college teams as well, It's just the sort of thing, like, just like American football fans go and watch, not, like, necessarily just supporters of that one team, or the two teams, rather, that are playing.
Yeah, because, British sports culture is very, very different to Americans. And I think we sort of embrace the American side when we go to watch the NFL EU games. But do you think potentially in the next 10 years that if we get a franchise in London, the games will be like that week in, week out? Or do you think it would be a very hard road to build that up again while the potential expansion team we get pulls itself out of the very big hole they get put in being an expansion team?
I mean, like, obviously it's been, like, muted around for 10 years already now, hasn't it? Like, one day we'll have a London franchise. I personally wouldn't give up following the Arizona Cardinals for them. And I'm sure, like, pretty much most of the people who have the team already wouldn't do it. But, like, they'd go there as, like, second team. Maybe, like, pick them up as a second team and, like, go watch them as much as they can. But then especially when, like, their other team comes and plays them. So, yeah, it'd be weird. Like, obviously, it'd definitely be, like, more of a home team atmosphere for them, being the fact that they are the London team.
Yeah, because obviously we had the London Monarchs in NFL EU. Do you think at this point they would just move the Jaguars and keep the name and just call them the London Jaguars?
I think anything's possible, really, but I can't really see it being the Jaguars being the London team, even though they're, like, here every single year for, like, who knows how much longer.
Yeah, I was going to say, and obviously I feel like it was a step towards it with the Tottenham Hotspur ground being built with the NFL in mind. It's clearly becoming more and more popular in the UK. How far do you think we are actually away from a London or at least European-based franchise?
I'm personally of the opinion, like, I hope it never happens because, it's American football. There's plenty of markets in America they've still not really exploited enough to, like, get a team there. Or even into Canada. I suppose, like, Toronto, somewhere like that could maybe get a team. There's still other options as opposed to, like, coming over to the UK and, like, making the American Football League, like, a worldwide sort of thing. Maybe it'd, like, just be a bit weird.
Yeah, I think when they originally tried it, there just wasn't I don't think there was the fan base there. That they didn't really have the capacity for that sort of thing. But we see it now. It's a very popular game. There's professional leagues throughout Europe, from Italy to Germany to Austria to Switzerland. We see all these professional leagues popping up. And even in the UK, you've got guys playing semi-professionally. So I think at that point, it's only a matter of time. And the Canadian football leagues even open up the international draft and the international combine, where they go to countries like Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Japan, China, and they grab international players to sort of open the game up. Do you think we're more likely to see a independent league pop up with professional style football than we are seeing the NFL come over here? Do you think that's going to come first?
I could think that would probably be more possible, yeah, if there's like obviously there'll be a market for it, but it depends if there's like financial backers and that sort of thing for it, because obviously something like that would cost a lot of money.
I mean, we've seen leagues come and go, and the CFL's been there for forever, and obviously the XFL. The Rock bought it now, and it seems like that's going to be a big deal. Do you think potentially they'll make a play at coming over to the UK?
I think anything would be possible, trying something that the NFL isn't doing, that could be like one way to like take some of their market share,
Yeah. I feel like Europe we're on the precipice of getting a huge thing like that, and we've seen it with baseball and basketball. They have teams in Canada, and it would suck for the CFL to the NFL to put up 2 Canadian teams, because obviously the CFL is kind of struggling right now, and that's probably almost as fun as the NFL for me to watch. So I think probably anything is probably possible if we're looking at it that way. Do you watch college football at all? Do you stick with Arizona teams in that regard too?
I mean, in college football, I just prefer mainly watching like individual players as opposed to teams. Though, like I've tried to follow teams, but then it's like I see players from other teams I enjoy watching. So I'm like, I just like a college football fan, really. Like I enjoy watching players more than I enjoy watching teams.
I might have to try and get you on the LSU train then, my friend. That's a very, very fun team to watch. Probably the best quarterback room in college football right now, even though one of them just entered the transfer portal. But before we get out of here, sort of talk to me about your Twitter page and stuff, British Bird Gang, and all the stuff you're doing over there, because you are the number one UK-based Cardinals content page, if I am informed correctly.
Yeah, well, obviously there's not really much competition in that regard, so we just like to say that's us because, it's true, and no one can really argue that point.
Well, I mean, it's definitely a different... They're not the most popular team at all. I think just sort of the market they're in the US, and they've moved around a lot. Obviously, they were in St. Louis for a little bit and stuff before they finally settled on Arizona. Do you ever think they'll move again? And if they did, would you still remain a fan?
Yeah, I would, because I'm not really like from Arizona, so that really wouldn't bother me as much. I mean, it'd suck for the people of Arizona to lose the team. And also the fact that they've got like probably one of the best stadiums in the entire league. I don't think you'd give that up straight away or for anything really.
I was going to say, you guys have got very, very nice, very, very nice facilities. I know people who've been to Phoenix and seen games. My friend Nad actually lives in Arizona, and he's been a bunch of times. He absolutely loves watching the Cardinals play. Just sucks living in a fucking desert. But we're from the UK. We can't really relate to that. We're rained on, I think, 99% of the time.
Exactly. I'm not sure how I'd cope when I actually end up going to Arizona, temperatures like that. I might just like melt on the spot.
Oh, mate, I live in Cincinnati, and I'm like in shorts and and a t-shirt, and there's people walking around with jackets on. What the fuck is wrong with you people? And it was the same for my girlfriend, who's from Cincinnati, who went to LA, and she was walking around in shorts and a t-shirt, and people out there had jackets and scarves on. So it really shows the different reactions to the weather. I think if we went to Arizona for a little bit, we'd probably both be not only sunburnt, but way too used to hot weather, because I hear it gets very, very hot out there.
Yeah. I don't like, obviously I wouldn't like to go into temperatures like 40 odd degrees, but if there's plenty of air conditioning, I think I'd survive, hopefully.
Yeah, it's no fun. But with that, this sort of brings us to the end of the podcast. And before we run the outro and wrap this up, what do you have to plug? I know, obviously, I've got your Twitter up on screen, but is there anything else you'd like to talk about, including your podcast?
Yeah, well, obviously, we have the Twitter page, British Bird Gang. Off that, we have a Facebook group as well, facebook.com/groups/British Bird Gang, and a Facebook page as well, which is British Bird Gang. We also have a podcast which is weekly during the season, less often in the off season, and that's called the British Bird Gang Breakdown, which you can find on all good podcast platforms.
And also britishbirdgang.co.uk. I know you guys do some merch as well. I've seen a couple of your shirts and stuff. Good designs as well. I like the sort of the Kyler Murray headband stuff that you've got going on with your logo as well.
Yeah, I should probably get that printed up as merchandise, not just like a crappy Photoshop.
I thought it looked exciting. I was expecting to see it on some of the hoodies and stuff, but I like the current design that you've got on the t-shirts and stuff. It's very also kind of potentially could be a new logo for the Cardinals, since they need to update their logo at some point. I think that's a very clean design that you guys have got over there.
Yeah, same thing with the uniforms as well. Everyone wants a brand new uniform. Whether we get one sometime soon, who knows?
You hoping to get back the classics with the Arizona State flag on the shoulder pads?
I think it'd be nice to see them modernized, because I mean, you see so many like good mock-ups on Twitter and Reddit, that sort of thing. You know, people have got great ideas, and then you just think it could be as bad as like Tampa Bay's redesign. I hope it isn't.
I was going to say, you see sort of uniforms going back to that older style with Tampa Bay and the Browns and even the Chargers in some respects. Is that what you're hoping for? A more classic Arizona uniform design?
I think I'm open to anything really, because, you know, I don't mind the home shirt and like the alternate black one, but I really just don't like the away one because it just looks messy, like with the red shoulders on the white. I think just all white, it'd be much better. Yeah,
I was going to say as well, we've got the new helmet rule coming in this season where you can have 2 helmet shells. So potentially we could see you guys with black helmets and an all blackout uniform, almost college style. I think that'd look pretty good.
Clifford thinking back at home then.
Yeah, it would look exactly like Texas Tech, right down to the color of the logo. But thank you for coming on today, Tom. Really appreciate you giving up your time and coming to talk to us today. And from me here at Kieran's Corner and the Full 10 Yards team, this was your team, you'll say, talking about the Arizona Cardinals. Thank you very much, guys. We will see you in the next one.
Kick it and go. Kick it and go. We step on, spin, move, in zone, go. Off the sideline, a touchdown, I put on a show. Kick it and go.